How's it going, my true people? DrSlaking, the Slacking Doctor, back with another Draft League preview. As today we are looking at, and going to have some minor spoilers here, so if you don't want to be spoiled for DLC stuff, click away quickly. But we are looking at the final new Pokemon released in the DLC. I know, right? Not enough, nowhere near enough. I was hearing all sorts of rumors prior to DLC, which I won't spoil in case they are coming in the next DLC. Or any further DLCs, because who knows, there might be more than two. But anyway, yeah, pretty underwhelming, right? But here we go. Speaking of underwhelming, we today are analysing Galarian Slowbro, hence the double Slowbro team builder. I'm going to use the original Slowbro as a point of reference. I think that's pretty valid. And we're going to look at the new Slowbro, but not just what I think its role will be in Draft League, whether I think it's good or bad, but also what this might indicate for future form changes, which I think could be really significant. So, let's start with this one. This Slowbro is the classic regenerated Slowbro. Nowadays, running sets like, Scald. I don't even know whether they run Psychic Stab on these things, to be honest. You could run, like, Thunder Wave, Toxic, Slack Off, and Teleport. Pretty good. I mean, maybe something like this is a more common set or something. I'm not exactly sure what Slowbro is running in the Nat Dex meta, but I know this thing's pretty prevalent in that meta. I think it's running Leftovers, and I think I've seen heavy duty boots, maybe for spikes and T-spikes and stuff, which is interesting. So essentially functioning a bit like Clef in that sense, being able to come in, not taking any chip, and pivot out. Pretty interesting, if you ask me. But Slowbro has been so good for generations. It's kind of been like, a tier 3 in most draft leagues, maybe tier 2 in some that price it quite highly. I don't know, my memory's a bit vague on that. Commonly considered to be a little bit better than Slowking by most people, but generally tiered around the same. It's a really good physical wall, great bulky water, fires off Scalds, hard switching on if you don't want to get burned, or T-waved, or toxic, or whatever, good status options, nice coverage in terms of Fire Blast, now gets teleport to pivot out with slow momentum and regen up. Just generally a really bulky wall, also gets things like Nasty Plot now, which I don't think it had before, and also like Calm Mind. I think it gets stored power sets, right? I think it got access to stored power this generation, which I don't think it had before. Reliable cover and slack off. So this thing has just been a staple of like regen core teams and bulky kind of balanced to semi-stall teams in Draft League. The kind of dominant, in my opinion, team archetype last generation was that kind of balanced to semi-stall in Draft League, and Slowbro was a prevalent part of that. So really a huge Pokemon. Its stats, its base HP is fine, base defense is big, base special attack is fine, base SPDF is fine. Attack and speed leaves a lot to be desired, but it's just like, it's not incredibly bulky apart from the physical side, but it's just tanky enough with Regenerator to never die. And if you invest it right, if you run like Assault Vest was a set that I ran a few times, you can be hard to KO on either side. Now the teleport, of course, that momentum with Regenerator we've seen is obnoxious if you've watched any Nat decks, and now of course it's back in the regular decks, but in Nat decks I know it was pretty common for things like Dracovish, Mega Metagross, Darmanitan, Galaform, and stuff like that. So how did they change it up when they brought out the new Slowbro? Cue my homemade Slowbro sprite. Oh, look at this. I didn't make it, but I'm adding it to the video because I edit now. They changed it quite a lot. Let's start with the stat distribution. So they took a little bit into speed here. I got 25 extra points in attack, not speed. 25 points in attack. Where do we take those from? Well, we took 15 out of defense, and we took 10 out of SPDF. So we've lost 25 bulk points, mainly on the physical side, and we've put it into physical attack. Seems kind of weird to me. Why would we make that transition to a Pokemon that was famously good at being bulky, pivoting around and regenerating stuff off? Okay, well, we've changed typings as well, becoming a poison type. Psychic poison, not a bad typing, pretty interesting typing, very good fighting resist, for example. Pretty nice to come in on fairies and stuff like that. Fine, decent bulky typing, not the worst in the world. I would argue probably not as good as a bulky water is, especially in the Draft League format. But if you're looking to pick up a fat poison type because maybe, I don't know, your fire type was Infernape and your steel type was, I'm trying to think of frail offensive steals, Kartana. I don't know why your team is Infernape Kartana, but if it is, you're like, wow, I need a fat poison to be able to resist some fairies. And, suddenly Slowbro Galaform would make some sense. I could see that. So in Draft League format, definitely has a niche on its typing side of things. But why this stat change? Well, they introduced a new ability, so it keeps its own tempo just the same, but instead of Oblivious, it now has a signature ability in Quick Draw, combining with that arm you can see there on the sprite, giving a 20% chance to move first. This stacks, we believe, right now with Quick Claw, which also gives you a 20% chance to move first. So what we're understanding is that it is moving first around 40%. Now, of course, we're very early in the metagame now. This might change, but right now our understanding is, I seen Skyranda shout out to him tweeting about it, that he did some testing and found that it wasn't stacking, but it was in reply to somebody else who had done a much bigger test and found that it was. So we're still early in the metagame, and look how many years it took Showdown to get the metronome interaction right, so we'll wait to see how this turns out over the coming months, but right now we think this stacks, so that's potentially a 40% chance to move first, which is, it's not bad, you know, 50-50 almost chance of moving first is not bad at all. Like that kind of priority, we've seen things like Talonflame with broken priority in the past, well, broken priority in the past. For me personally, I'm still running Regenerator on this, I'll be honest with you. I've been discussing this with Eric Stromful. I'm still probably running Assault Vest, Regenerator, probably, to be honest with you, and I'm pivoting in and I'm trying to get off as many big hits as I can, and then I'm pivoting out. Now, this thing did get a new signature move, a poison type 90 base power move that will hit your opponent on whichever side it would do more damage. Now, that isn't like Photon Geyser where it varies on your attack or special attack stat. It is literally based on which would do more damage to your opponent. So I'm assuming, and again, I don't know the full interactions here, that if your opponent had clicked Acid Armor and had +2 defense, and you were a physically offensive Slowbro, you would then hit them on the special side because their stat boosts had meant so that your special attack would hit them harder, even though at base unboosted your physical attack would hit them harder. Does that make sense? I think that's how it's going to work, that it will factor in their investment, your investment, their stat boosts, your stat boosts, and all of that stuff, which is pretty interesting because it means you always hit your opponent on the hardest side you could hit them on. The problem I have with this, although it's great, is one, there's a full immunity in steel types that are very, very common in Draft League. Almost every team worth its salt has a steel type that can switch in and take that. Your secondary stab also is walled or resisted by steel types, so steel types will be the dominant switch into you, the most common switch into you. So suddenly your signature move isn't that spammable because there's a full immunity coming in on you every time if you're an offensive set or if you're in a offensive set. So let's say you wanted to run like Life Orb, Nasty Plot, Fire Blast, something like this, right? Now, this set will do a lot of damage. I believe Eric calced Sludge Wave from this thing, which is 95 base power. I think it was Sludge Wave, which calced slightly stronger than your signature move. And he was saying that without a boosting item, I think this was on a Quick Claw set, you could OHKO an uninvested Hydreigon at +2. So you can see that, you know, if you nasty plot up as an Hydreigon comes in thinking it's going to revenge kill you, you know, they sack something to you, and then you get the Quick Claw or Quick Draw priority boost, you'll OHKO that Hydreigon 68% of the time it was. So that is strong. It is decently strong. I mean, anything at +2 is going to be decently strong with a modest nature. But to me, when I look at that, I'm like, well, that's 40% of the time you go first, 68% of the time you OHKO the Hydreigon, and you have to set up and take a KO before the Hydreigon comes in to revenge kill you, all the while taking chip, when you're not that tanky. Like 95 is Sylvally levels of bulk. Sylvally can definitely be built bulky, but that would be my reference Pokemon for this thing in terms of bulk. Is that if we look at Sylvally's bulk here, 95, Slowbro 95, 70. So you're physically the same, and especially even frailer. And Sylvally isn't crazy bulky. Like, Sylvally will get a Swords Dance off, but then Sylvally will outspeed your slower walls that might switch in on it. And then quite often, if it's Swords Dance, it will also be Flame Charge, so it'll outspeed the rest of your team. And that's how it breaks you. I feel like this Slowbro is so dependent on getting its Quick Claw, Quick Draw boosts to do any damage that to me it is such an unreliable wall break. If my wall breaker only wall breaks 40% of the time, it's not a good wall breaker, and I can't control that. I cannot control that interaction. I just have to sit there and go, well, I'm lucky, so I'll get it. It's definitely an obnoxious Pokemon, and it definitely will be a threat, because as an opponent, you're hoping you get the 60% chance, right? It's like, it's worse than switching in on a Scold, and no one wants to switch in on a Scold with their attacker that they don't want to get burnt. So I do completely understand that this will be a pain in the ass, and the times that it moves fast, it will be decent. It has the perfect coverage here to be able to hit most things in the game, being able to hit the steel types at Wall its other two, or at Wall its stabs with Fire Blast / Flamethrower. I do definitely think it's not a bad Pokemon at all, but I just think I don't see the wall breaking set being reliable. I don't see it being consistent. I think if you want to run this thing, you want to probably run it like Assault Vest Regenerator. We don't believe it gets access to Teleport, as that was a transfer move on Slowbro that it wouldn't get access to, being a Galar native Pokemon. So we're really looking at it and thinking, or I'm really looking at it and thinking, I think you could be a good bulky poison if you're coming up against, you know, a Clefable, a Florges, depending on which kind of metagame you're playing in, Natdex or Wi-Fi or whatever. You can switch it in, you know, you can be Assault Vested, you'd be able to take any kind of Psychic coverage that would follow it up and probably OHKO them with Sludge Wave or Sidearm in the Florges' case, being able to target down its physical attack. I do think that's really useful, I do. But that's how I see it. I see it as a bulky poison that you can switch in a little bit, you can fire off a hit, and you can regen out. I just see it as like a worse Amoonguss. I see it as a pretty mediocre poison, especially in the Natdex metagame. I wouldn't draft this thing over Amoonguss. I wouldn't draft it over any number of bulky poisons. Like, we have other bulky poisons that exist in Pokemon that are just not great. Like, regular Muck. This thing, 105 HP, 75 defense, 100 SPDF, 105 attack. This thing is specially tankier, physically a little bit frailer. It's going to be close, right? It's going to be pretty close in terms of physical bulk, I think. A little bit physically frailer, but stronger. And it still isn't good. It still is not good. So, whilst yes, this does have a second typing, and I do think it's better than regular Muck, I'm not convinced by this thing at all. I think it is the most underwhelming Pokemon in the DLC. I think Quick Draw should have been something better. I think its signature move should have been stronger than Sludge Wave if they were going to give it this move, because it's a great move, but with these base like attack stats, it's not like you're running Swords Dance or anything either. So most of the time, if you're a breaking set, you are gonna want Sludge Wave, because if you're nasty plotting up, it's very unlikely you're going to hit harder on the physical side, especially because you're not going to want to have a minus SPDF or a minus defense nature if you want to set up. So maybe you could run minus speed on this thing, I guess, because you're getting these boosts anyway, so I guess this would be your set. But realistically, like, there's a big gap between 205 and 328 when you've nasty plotted up. So I think you're going to be running Sludge Wave anyway, so everyone going, the move's broken, the move's broken. You're probably just going to want the damage output on a nasty plot set. I don't know. Unless you got a special thing like Florges or something to hit. I think it's niche, but mostly I think it's bad. I don't see myself ever drafting this thing unless it really, like, I'm getting down to like my 9th or 10th pick in a draft, and I'm like, damn, I don't have a grounded poison. If it got T-Spikes, regenerated T-Spikes, ooh, that would have been nice. I could have used that. I could have thrown it on a fairy. I could have got T-Spikes out, up. I could have regenerated out. I could have thrown it in a fighting type. I could have got T-Spikes up. I could have regenerated out. And I do think it's a good fighting type wall, like in coming against fighting types and wall them, but I don't know, most of them get Earthquake, most of them get Knockoff. You're still weak to the same things that other Slowbro was weak to, and now you're less physically bulky to take it. Before, regular Slowbro was struggling to take like an X-Scissor from Terrakion last gen, for example. You're not taking a Mega Horn from Terrakion this gen now with this Slowbro, so, or an Earthquake. So, yeah, I just... I don't know, I'm disappointed. Of all of them, like Zarude, I think can still be viable. I think people can still do work with it. This thing, it'll be people like Checkmate Ben who will get a lot out of it because they're creative team builders and they like weird Pokemon. But me personally, I'm not crazy about it. I'm not crazy about it at all. Maybe on Trick Room it could be good. What they needed to do was they needed to take this out of attack, was it 25? Yeah, the 25 that they dumped in attack, they just took it out of bulk and put it in a redundant stat, in my opinion. They should have put that in special attack. If you'd taken it out of bulk and made it 125 special attack with this ability and stacking with Quick Claw, I'd have been in on it, because I'd be like, we're OHKOing a lot of stuff after a nasty plot. But the fact that you have a 68% chance to OHKO an uninvested Hydreigon is naturally quite bulky for an offensive mon. Yes, that's good, but you've also got to get the priority chance. I don't know, it's not enough for me. It's not enough. That's where I'm going to leave it, because I feel like I'm just hating this Pokemon and people are going to love it and they're going to be bollocking me right now. But yeah, this Pokemon is just not enough in my opinion. It needed more. It needed a better stat distribution. Even if they'd left it at like 90 attack and 110 special attack, something like that. But what I do think is significant, having said I was going to leave it there, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video that I would talk about this. It had a 25-point stat shift. Now, correct me if I'm wrong down in the comment section, because genuinely I'll be curious if I've made a mistake here. But when something is a direct form change, i.e. Slowbro to Slowbro Gala, not Persian to Berserker, a direct same Pokemon regional variant, I don't think we've ever had more than a 10-point stat shift. I think everything from Alola got 10 points taken out of one stat and 10 points put in another, or 5 put in another and 5 put in another, or whatever it was. But I think we always got 10 points reshuffle. I think this is the first Pokemon where we've seen a 25-point stat reshuffle. Why do I think that matters? Why am I bringing that to your attention? Well, I did another Draft League preview video where I spoke a lot about the new form of this Pokemon, and I said, if they take 10 out of attack, special attack, and put it in attack, might be underwhelming. If they take 25 out of special attack and put it in attack, 115 attack for the new Zapdos with Defiant, we could be looking at a Pokemon, and I think that's what they might be doing. I think this might be setting a new precedent here with this new Slowbro for Pokemon to have a 25-point stat reshuffle, and I think that could be really interesting for the future. I think the Regis will be really interesting. I mean, they look like they're going to have more than that. They look like they're going to be complete stat reversals. So it's just kind of broken the trend that we've always had for regional variants before, and that's what most excites me about Slowbro, is what that could mean for the other Pokemon coming in the next DLC. Yeah, and that's much the story of this DLC, really is, yeah, the new stuff's fine for competitive use, it's nice to have old Pokemon come back, Urshifu's very cool, but for the most part, I feel like most competitive Pokemon players felt with this last DLC that it's the promise of what's to come that makes it exciting, not what we actually got this time. And certainly, yeah, the next DLC with the new mythical, the rabbit thing, the Regis, the legendary birds, yeah, that's going to be spicy for the competitive metagame. So until then, I think this will probably be our last Draft League preview. We'll be back to Draft League reviews starting Monday when I'm going to be reviewing Toxtricity. So if you guys are looking forward to that, make sure you're subscribed. There's a subscriber Discord link down in the description. We're trying to hit 50 members in our subscriber Discord and 500 subscribers on the channel here before the end of the year. If you're not already subscribed, as I say, please do consider doing that to show some support. I'm not very good at plugging, so I'm going to stop now. Thank you so much for loafing around with me, and I'll catch you again next time.